Jim Barker joins us, our football analyst, five-time Grey Cup champion. And Jim, here we are, my guy. Football ended last week, at least as far as games. So I'm just wondering where your head is. What league, what level, what are you thinking these days?
Well, I was all over the place until you went and started to pop off about what Henry Burris got from Calgary. And where did you get your information?
I think Henry.
Do you know who negotiated that contract for Calgary?
Let me guess, you.
Yes. And it was nowhere near what you say. Now, maybe Henry said this and he wanted you to think that, but that was not where it was at. In fact, I have a great story for how that all went down. So the new owners, John Frizani and Ted Heller, they had just bought the team and basically hired me as the general manager. And Kahari Jones had been the quarterback there with Matt Dunnigan and wanted to stay. And so when we came in and basically they hired me in the middle of January, by the time I got done doing all the All-Star games and all that, it was middle of February, and I sat down with the owners and they said, what if we offer Kahari a low deal, but what they felt was a fair deal at $180,000. So we offered Kahari, and we would have not gone on Henry. This is a true story. I mean, I have no reason to make it up. So we went to Henry's agent and said, we will offer you $180,000. And he said, I can't sign for less than 200. I just can't do that. And I kind of understood what he was saying, but that was where he was. I said, as soon as we hang the phone up, we're going to go out and sign Henry Burris. And he said, we can't go that low. And I think he probably thought we would come back to him. But we didn't. We hung up the phone. And again, he was offered right in the 300 range. The whole thing about RVs and all that, again, maybe it happened, and I had no knowledge. It was people who had nothing to do with the Stampeders and the ownership group there. They were not into that. That ownership group was not at all into giving out these extra things, any under the table thing. That just wasn't part of the deal. And so we went to Henry, and like I said, we were going to get him. And I think it ended up being around 300. I think you're exactly right. They weren't going to go over 250. That was kind of Roy's number, I believe. But I don't remember that number exactly. I do remember how the whole thing went down, though. And I do know it wasn't like we just rolled in all this stuff in Calgary to get Henry. Now, Henry changed Calgary completely because Calgary was down to draw on 3,000 to 4,000 people. It was owned by a guy who really didn't care about the CFL or Calgary, and he cared about his son. And as soon as those guys, John and Frizani and Hellard and Dave Sapungis and that solid group of owners that we had, as soon as they came in, the city got behind them. Then we go out and get Henry Burris and go 11-7 the first year and made the playoffs. We had made the playoffs every year up until last year from 2005. So again, be careful when you start talking, because those things, when you say, they rolled out, they gave him 2 RVs and 500,000, it makes the person who was the GM look like an idiot. And then you got him waiting in the wings to come on. So I don't know.
Oh, Jim. 20 years. It was 20 years ago. The stories get better. Do you remember we played you guys in the preseason, and Roy said we were going to come in and break Henry's neck? Remember that? It was on the front page of the Calgary Sun the next day.
It was classic stuff. It really was.
Okay, be careful, he says. Oh, because you've never fudged numbers. Okay, Laura from Edmonton writes in. Laura, on the Progressive Insurance text line, 902-518-3033. She says, hey, RP, I decided to spend 1 year to totally dedicate to the CFL and NFL as a new viewer. I really enjoyed it. But as a resident of Edmonton, I'm not clear about what's gone on with the Elks. So no preconceived notions about the Elks. My question is, what would be a good game to go to, i.e. visiting team versus Elks? Thanks, RP and squad. Well, I'm going to say go to Sask at Edmonton, or Calgary at Edmonton. You can't go wrong. I can tell you right now when that Calgary at Edmonton game will be. It'll be the Saturday after Labor Day weekend. But she's asking, she didn't really know what's going on with Edmonton. Jim, I think everybody feels they've won the offseason or the free agency and offseason. Do you?
Well, I would say to her, go to the first game they play, because that game's going to tell a lot about. We talked about it last year. They played Saskatchewan in the opener. I don't know who they're playing this year, but we said that game is going to be key to how both seasons, Saskatchewan and Calgary's and Edmonton season, go. And sure enough, it did. So I would say go to the first game, because it's going to set a tempo for what kind of a team that Mark Killam's trying to build there, doing the things that they're trying to do. Now, in terms of them and free aid, here's the bottom line. There's no, you could talk about a salary cap and 400,000. We've talked about this every week. There's no salary cap in the CFL. And now with the money, the appearance money, if they go, say the cap is $6 million and they go to $6.2 million, they just have to take $200,000 out of their salaries and put it onto appearance money, and they're at the cap. Also, it's a luxury tax. Okay, you're going to lose. You can lose first round picks. You can lose up to $100,000 if you go over the cap. But it's truly a luxury tax. My belief, and again, you talk to more people than I do, but my belief is Edmonton made a decision. We're going to do what we have to do, and if we got to go over, we're going to go over. But we're going to get this thing changed around. I remember Ed back in when we were both GMs and we were at the NFLPA game when Mike Riley was a free agent. And I was just kind of joking. I said, so what are you going to pay Mike? And he said, whatever I have to. Dead serious. And that's the way Ed operates. He knows what he wants, and he's going to go out and get it. Now, my belief is with the new ownership, he's kind of got carte blanche to go and build this team in the way he wants to do it. So I don't know that there was ever a cap issue that he was worried about. I don't think it was he knew about this 400 and other people didn't. I don't believe people knew about it personally in terms of people I've talked to. Yeah. But again, I'm not media, so I don't get the same kind of contacts you do.
You are media, and who's paying you? Media. I don't talk to as many as you. I talk to like 3 guys, but here's the thing. I trust them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't need a big net. Interesting here, because one of the reasons I called my guy this morning was about flipping rosters, because I said Riders lost half of their O-line and 3/4 of their D-line or whatever it is. And I said, back in the day, Jim, you guys always wanted continuity year to year to year. It worked. And he goes, I said, it's not a thing anymore. And last night I was on a show here. We talked about the Michigan Wolverines. They went, Jim, the basketball team, from 3 wins last year to the basketball team, Michigan Wolverines, to leading the Big Ten, and they only had 2 returning players, all because of the transfer portal. My question to you is, how does that change coaching when you don't have the same room every year? This guy that I talked to, a GM, didn't seem that worried about it. He's like, we just need to coach him up better.
Yeah, coaching isn't, in pro football, you expect to coach new guys every year. It just, again, if you can get it going to where you have the same guys, it makes it easier because now your players become coaches for the things you're doing. But usually when you have a good team, you're going to lose coaches and you're going to have to be bringing new coaches in, which is a different thing. So I don't think that's an issue at all in terms of turning a team over. Again, the key to turning a team over is getting that quarterback that you know can win. When we were in Calgary, Henry Burris. When we were in Toronto, Ricky Ray. I mean, you have to do that, and you can't speculate on things. That's my concern with Edmonton. Hey, Trey Ford could end up becoming the best thing that Canada has seen a quarterback in forever, but he hasn't. And they're putting all their eggs in his basket. Yeah, Cody's there, but this is Trey Ford's team. They've made that known, and it should be. Okay, that's the way it is. But no matter how much you surround him with great players, it's still going to come down to, can Trey Ford execute when they need and to get them over the hump? They'll be good. They'll be good everywhere. I mean, their defense will be much improved. They went after the lines. I mean, you look at the Super Bowl this year. Okay, it was so similar to the Grey Cup in that The team that was slightly favored, okay, came into the game slightly favored, basically physically got their butts kicked, okay, because you win. This is for the new fan in Edmonton. Always watch the lines. When an offensive and a defensive line can dominate a game, that team's going to win. And that's what happened in our Grey Cup. Toronto's offensive and defensive line controlled Winnipeg's offensive and defensive line. In the Super Bowl, same thing. Philadelphia's offensive and defensive line completely controlled Kansas City's offensive and defensive line. I mean, the score ended 40-22, but it was not that close.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to argue with you on football, but I'll say this. The Grey Cup was a 1-point game going into the fourth quarter. Argos leading, and when Zach cut his finger, to me, that's when it changed. There was that line domination, yes. But if Zach doesn't get hurt and can finish the game, I don't think the Argos win.
Well, that's your prerogative to think that. I mean, Zach actually went down earlier in the in the third quarter, as I recall,
right,
because they were coming right down, getting ready to score there, right by where our Duffy and my table were. So I kind of remember that. But my point is that in big games, ultimately lines win out. And Philadelphia played that game against Kansas City, rushing 4 players the whole game. When you can do that, Patrick Mahomes, he went back. He had no time to throw because Philadelphia's defensive line was all over him. And their secondary was giving him so many different looks. He could hold it, but he couldn't find anybody open because of all the different coverage things they were doing. When you can control a team by rushing just 4 guys, and that's what Toronto has had. Toronto's been a team that can rush 4 guys and get pressure. And they've had an offensive line that's been physical enough to both run the ball and protect the quarterback. So, again, when you have those things, you have a chance to win. I thought Kansas City, their offensive line, their tackles, Thuney, we talked about it on your show. He's a guard. He was moved to guard in college because his arms are so short. And when you play tackle, you need to have longer arms in order to separate those guys that are so fast. And he didn't have that. They were getting into his body. And once they're in your body, they're, the quicker guy controls everything. So, I think that the left tackle hurt him. The right tackle, obviously, Jawan Taylor for Kansas City. He's the most penalized player in the league, and he just struggled all day with everybody. So, again, credit to Philadelphia's defensive line, of which I bet you can't name one player. Can you? Right.
No. Kansas City's D-line?
No, Philadelphia.
Philadelphia's. No.
See?
No, they're a
That's
team.
my point is,
absolutely.
It was Brandon Graham and Carter and all these different guys that they were bringing in and that you haven't heard of, but they pressured with 4 people. So, yeah, that was and so I think, again, I look at what Edmonton's doing. The one thing they haven't done, the 2 things. One is trade for going to be we don't know that. That's going to be a big question mark for them. And then the offensive line. They get Beard back from Hamilton, who's a huge get. I think he's one of the best centers in the league. But they haven't addressed the tackle. They're hoping that the guys that they had can, Boyko's re-signed back and that maybe those guys can play. But they weren't good enough. But again, you never know with new thing. And now with trade forward a quarterback, it puts a whole different dimension back there for the offensive line.
We only have a minute, but Ted and Red Deer would like your opinion on how will the NIL affect players. What's the wording here? Hey, Coach, do you think the huge NIL dollars will affect how many players come north to the CFL to play?
Well, I think players are more likely to stay in college than even go to the NFL at this point. Those 6th, 7th round guys, that 5th, 6th, 7th round guys that might opt out of their last year and go try out in the NFL, that brings more guys to Canada. I think those guys are going to stay. They're going to stay in college much longer now because the amount of money, the difference in money is it's not that much. I mean, Ohio State, they had a $20 million budget for their players. I mean, so guys there are making more money than than they can even make in the NFL as as practice roster guys. So those lower half of the rosters in the NFL, which are going to be the CFL guys, they may stay longer there. So yeah, it's definitely going to affect it, but there's just such a ongoing movement of players and both from the UFL, which starts in March, and players will play there, and then some will come to Canada. They'll try to get to the NFL. If they don't get to the NFL, then they'll try to get to Canada next year. Because the UFL is not a career type of league like the CFL. The CFL is a career type of league, and it's a big difference. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of, I think if the free agency in the CFL was interesting, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I just love that people are talking about the CFL right now. I think that's important. I've started breaking down all the guys that are going to be at the combine. So for the draft, so that when we do the draft show, I have knowledge of all these guys, and I've actually broken them down myself. And there's some really good players that are not going to be NFL guys. And that's really the fascinating thing about the CFL draft.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that next week. Jim, thanks for this. It's been fun. Thanks for clarifying things from way back in 2005. And have a great weekend.
Thank you, Rod. I had to call you out. I just had to.
I got you. The CFL on TSN's Jim Parker. We'll be right back with a sports update and viewer takeover. We are live here on Game Plus TV, streaming live and podcasting wherever the best podcasts are found.